Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today we're going to finalise our Grey Knights videos by having a quick look at their equipment before moving on to look at more Space Marine chapters. Now, the Space Marines of the Grey Knights have rather specific equipment that is not used by other members of other Space Marine chapters. Now, of course, there is the standard power armour that you will have seen, but of course even that varies from the standard equipment of a Space Marine in, say, the Blood Angels or the Ultramarines. Now, the most unique piece of equipment that is used by a Grey Knight is the Nemesis Force Weapon. Now, these are characteristic weapons of the Grey Knights, and virtually every single Grey Knight you see in either the artwork or the models themselves is wielding a Nemesis Force Weapon. Now, these can take the form of a halberd, a sword, a mace, an axe. Any sort of weapon that is used to cut or bludgeon can be a Nemesis weapon. Now, it's a very powerful force weapon, as I've described in my previous videos, and it houses a psi matrix that is attuned to the unique psyche of its owner. Now, the original versions of the Nemesis Force Weapon actually had incorporated into their haft a bolter, very similar to the Adeptus Custodes Guardian Spear. Now, the newer models only incorporate a standard haft and a blade or a bludgeon, whereas the weapons of the Grey Knights, i.e. the Storm Bolters, are wrist-mounted, very similar to the Angelus Bolter wielded by some members of the Blood Angels chapter. They also have a specialist flame weapon known as an Incinerator. Now, this is very similar to a heavy flamer, as used by most Space Marine chapters. However, it's actually fueled by a special mix of consecrated promethium and blessed oils. Now, these are designed to be specifically effective against demons, as fire is already very useful against purging warp creatures. This blessed fire is actually one of the best ways for the Grey Knights to deal with large numbers of numerous lesser demons. As opposed to having to fight them individually, they can burn them with promethium. The Grey Knights also use a heavy weapon known as a psi cannon, which is very similar to a bolt weapon. Now, these fire ammunition that use negative psychic energy somehow impregnated into the bolt itself, which means that when fired it actually disrupts the very nature of the warp entity when it hits them, thus allowing a better destruction of larger warp entities, as the Incinerator is used to destroy smaller warp entities. Now, moving from weapons into the armour of the Grey Knights, the specific armour that they use is called Aegis armour, which is slightly different to the power armour worn by most Space Marines. Aegis armour actually covers both suits of power armour and Terminator armour worn by the Grey Knights, and they are incredibly well crafted, with a lattice of psychoconductive filaments and amulets actually embedded into the armour itself and inscribed with prayers and wards, and are also ritually consecrated and psychically charged. Now, all this is used to be an anathema to demons, so that the armour is not only protective against the physical blows that may attack them, but also the psychic forces that may assail them when fighting demons, and thus making sure their flesh and their armour is left uncorrupted by the forces which they face. And the armour is also a weapon in itself, actually hurting and instilling fear into nearby demons, making them far more easy to remove from the materium with the actual weapons of the Grey Knights. And the Grey Knights don't actually have that many different vehicles from that of a normal Space Marines chapter. They use rhinos, they use some larger vehicles, although they very rarely use tanks such as Predators and other such vehicles, as, of course, if they do need that sort of weaponry, usually the threat has gone too far for them to be directly involved. They'll requisition weaponry from the Imperial Guard or the Inquisition in order to deal with it. Thus, it's usually a rhino that will be seen transporting a Grey Knight around. Now, they do have dreadnoughts, however, the difference between a Grey Knight's dreadnought and a dreadnought that serves in a normal chapter is that a Grey Knight's dreadnought is less inclined to exist, because their ultimate goal is to be brought back to Titan and rest with their brothers in the catacombs beneath their fortress monastery. Now, being a dreadnought does remove that possibility, thus meaning there are very few Grey Knight's dreadnoughts, as many see it as when they die, their task is complete. Now, there is a specific vehicle/heavy armour that is used by the Grey Knights in addition to their normal armour, and that is the Nemesis Dread Knight. Now, this is a unique large suit of mechanised armour different from that of a dreadnought. Now, this is designed to face greater demons, which are usually far larger than a standard Space Marine, so they use this articulated larger armour in order to fight the greater demon on its terms, using larger weaponry and being more protected in order to stop them from being crushed by these vast demons of the warp. Finally, I want to quickly talk about their fleet. Now, Most Space Marines are not known for their void fleets and fleets of starships, because they rarely ever feature as a major force, as opposed to them being deployed themselves directly into combat. However, the ships of the Grey Knights are special because they are some of the most advanced left in the Imperium. Now, the Mechanicus can only claim to have more advanced ships, and the reason for this is really so that the Grey Knight ships can travel very quickly through the warp in order to get to any areas which are in trouble fast enough in order to stop them from being consumed by demons or the demon they are hunting escaping before they arrive. And this is primarily allowed due to the wards which are inscribed within the ship, which protects them from the sight of demons in the warp, allowing them quicker travel, and the engines, which are far more advanced than any else in the Imperium, mainly based on the fact that they have close ties to the Mechanicum, which lie on Mars, which of course in the galactic scale is almost next door to Titan in the Sol system. Now, this makes the Grey Knight's strike cruiser, as it's known, one of the most advanced void vessels in the entire Imperium, and it could serve no better force in this regard. Now, that's everything I wanted to mention on the Grey Knights. There's a few other differences between the Grey Knights and the Space Marines, as I've mentioned. They have several different squads, such as the Paladins and the Purifiers. Now, these aren't really different from their standard brothers. They only have slightly more select duties, such as the Paladins serving to protect the chapter and having to complete 8 quests in order to achieve their rank, and the Purifiers, mainly being the purest of the Grey Knights, serve as guardians of some dark thing in order to protect the wider Imperium from whatever this thing is, although I am unaware of exactly what this dark thing is. However, in every other respect, I've covered what I need to cover in relation to the Grey Knights. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments below, and as I've always said, the next chapter to come up will be one that is voted for by you, so do vote in the comments below to get your favourite chapter into the next video. Any other general questions, let me know via private message or leave a comment below, as I've mentioned before. So that's everything, see you next time on the Vaults of Terra.